These days, every job is a technology job. Whether you're a programmer, a marketer, or even just someone who sits down in front of a computer every day, you have a stake in the tapestry of the technology industry. Welcome to Wits and Wisdom, a podcast sharing insights, innovations, and inspiration from the award-winning Women in Tech Summit. Join host Gloria Bell, founder of the Women in Tech Summit, multi-hyphenate entrepreneur, and advocate for equity and equality in tech as she sits down with extraordinary guests from the WITS community. Listen in as they discuss wisdom from their career journeys, pro tips from their areas of expertise, and sneak previews of the biggest upcoming tech trends. This is Wits and Wisdom, a podcast from the Women in Tech Summit and Inspiring Tech Foundation.
Hello, and welcome to Wits and Wisdom, a podcast sharing insights, innovations, and inspiration from the award-winning Women in Tech Summit. I'm your host, Gloria Bell, founder of WITS and the Inspiring Tech Foundation. We are back live at WITS Northeast in Philadelphia, so pardon any background noise, with Leslie Chapman. Leslie's an engineering fellow at Comcast, was one of the technical leads on developing X1, the platform that 35 million customers interact with to use Comcast services, and was even honored with 2 Emmys. Wow, that's some impressive achievements, Leslie. Welcome to Wits and Wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, I want to talk a little bit about your journey in tech and how you got to where you are now in the work that you're doing. When you were growing up, did you always know you wanted to work in tech, or was that a discovery you made at some point along the way?
A little bit of both, I would say. When I was younger, that was right around the time the first personal computers came out. And so I vividly remember my parents getting their first computer. It was a Tandy. And it was very expensive and very delicate and temperamental. And my parents told me, do not touch this. And so as with most children, as you're told, don't play with this, don't touch it, all I wanted to do was play with that computer and touch it and use it. And sure enough, my parents did let me use it supervised. And there wasn't really a lot that you could do. We had WordPerfect. That was really the reason we had it. And there was a DOS prompt where you could try to figure out how to write BASIC. And so those were the things that I learned. My mother taught me how to use WordPerfect because back then my parents wanted me to be able to be anything I could, but my mom wanted to also really make sure I was prepared to be an admin. And I also learned shorthand, but I kept looking at that prompt, blinking and just beckoning to me to do something with it. And so my parents got me a book from the library on how to write BASIC, and I taught myself. But through all of that, it never really dawned on me that it could be a career. It was a hobby. And fast forward, my parents got probably an Apple IIe or something, and I inherited the Tandy, and then my parents would get more and more computers and I would inherit the old ones. And then I was finally allowed to actually tinker with them and really play with them. And I started getting into hardware and figuring out how to overclock processors and daisy chain processors. And it was always a hobby. When it came time to choose what I wanted to do in college, my passion at the time, I wanted to be a filmmaker. And so my first major at Drexel University was film and video production. And I started taking the courses, and I found it didn't spark as much joy as tinkering with computers. And I would go back to my dorm room and continue to tinker with my computers. And I would talk to my mom, who was and still is my best friend, and say, oh, I don't know that I love this. And well, why don't you just go to school for computers? And it was like a light bulb went off, like, wait, I can turn my hobby into a career. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So what was your first job in tech?
My first job out of college was actually for Honeywell. And as I mentioned, I was always a bit of a tinkerer, both with software and with hardware. So out of the gate, I was actually what we refer to as an embedded software engineer, which kind of straddles that line of hardware and software. So I would write the software that really spoke directly to the hardware. So an example is 2 of our biggest customers were Nabisco, and our other big customers were gasoline companies. So ExxonMobil, Shell, Valero, et cetera, because believe it or not, making gasoline out of crude oil is actually quite similar to making cookies out of flour and sugar in terms of keeping the temperature right, getting the mixtures correct, making sure the flow is correct. So I spent a lot of my first years in the field actually getting to visit cookie plants and oil refineries.
What a great message about tech is everywhere. We hear that all the time, but I love being able to hear examples that tech really is everywhere. So in the work you're doing right now, you work as an individual contributor. So for our listeners who aren't in tech, can you break down what that actually means?
Sure, absolutely. Fast forward all this time after Honeywell, I've been with Comcast for 17 years. And over those 17 years, I have remained an individual contributor. So meaning that I am not a people leader. I do not have a team of individuals that report to me. I make a very strong distinction that I am not calling myself a leader, however. They do still report to me for technical direction. They do still look to me to lead them how we're going to approach solutions and problems. But when they want to take time off, they don't come to me. When they want to ask for a raise, they don't come to me. So that is the distinction of individual contributor.
That's a great explanation. I think it may make a lot of people be looking for that kind of role. A lot of people who would like to be leaders in leading the work, but maybe not the manager of people. I know that would have been my preference at a few times in my career. In being that individual contributor, do you think it gives you some freedoms that you might not otherwise enjoy if you were in some other roles?
I absolutely think it gives me freedom, and that's what I love about it. I have the ability to go and do exploration. I have the ability to go and fail fast, to try out new technologies, to take a chance and try something new, and not have a team of people that are relying on me for their livelihood and their families that might fail if I fail. I get to be an island that is supported, but when I want to go be an island and try something, I can do that. And it's really fun to be able to do that. And I get to take a lot of time to also just do research and to talk to a lot of people, because when I make those sorts of decisions and try out new technologies, I'm never going to do that in a vacuum. It's based on a lot of research. It's based on my own personal research and the research of others. I love reaching out to my colleagues. I focus on television, but Comcast is a really large company where there are several other divisions that are doing things outside of television and video delivery, but most of our problems aren't really unique. And I'm not going to lie to myself and say they are. So I love to reach across the aisle to my broadband cohort and boil a problem down to its nuts and bolts and say, have you ever had something like this happen before? And how did you solve it? Did it work? Would you still solve it that way today? Or would you do something different than you did 5 years ago? And gather all of that information to try to make informed decisions and try something new out or try something old out.
You talked about being an island. Are there some drawbacks to that sometimes?
I think there were more drawbacks earlier in my career, and maybe I'm just too heady now that I don't see them, but it took me a while to actually view myself as a leader. It took me a while to just say, I'm going to go do this. I think as an individual contributor, but also as a woman, also as a Black woman, I struggled a lot to need permission. And so I was constantly, may I? And it finally took a few people saying, stop asking me. Just go do it. We trust you. So that was something that I struggled with. And I still struggle with it from time to time of realizing I'm allowed to go do this. I'm allowed to ask folks to do things for me. The other thing that I struggled with was getting people to respect my opinion, because I don't control their paycheck, because I don't control various aspects of their career, why should they listen to me? And so that was kind of a hard one to learn because I was always taught to be humble, not to brag. And someone once upon a time gave me some really great advice, which was, you didn't tell them why they have to respect you. You didn't walk in the room and say, I'm Leslie Chapman. This is everything I've done. Now listen to me. And so that was some really great advice that I got once upon a time. And now when I walk into rooms where nobody knows me, I'm really able to try to not just come in and be like, we should do X, Y, and Z, but introduce myself, let them ask questions about why should they even listen to me. And I am ready and prepared to tell them exactly why they should listen to me.
That is amazing advice. I am so glad that you shared that with our listeners, because I think that is something, especially as women, that we don't do often enough. We don't step up and just own the space that we're in and own the work that we've done to give people a reason why they should follow us and why they should listen. So thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners. That's great story and great advice. So I'm talking about what your day-to-day looks like, because you've worked on some really great projects. So I'm a little curious, what does an average day in Leslie's life at work look like?
So one of the cool things about my job, I think it's cool, perhaps some people would not be able to thrive in the chaos, is that I never really know what my day is going to look like going into it. There's a lot of different things that just pop up. We build microservices, so middleware. So I went all the way from embedded, the hardware kind of stuff, all the way to the front end, and now have settled into a nice little niche in the middle, doing average engineering things, scrums. We do agile practices. So we're doing scrums. We're doing demos of what we've built to show to the whole team. I'm meeting with product owners to talk about what's coming next. So that's kind of your typical engineering, what I consider typical engineering stuff. And then sprinkled throughout the day is a lot of one-on-ones. I spend, I would say, 35 to 50% of my time doing one-on-ones. And that ranges anywhere from mentorship of several individuals that I mentor to just one-on-ones with my colleagues. I find having one-on-ones is a lot better way to get things done. I have a firm belief that nothing gets done in a meeting that has more than about 5 or 7 people. If you got 60 people in a meeting, I can guarantee you nothing's going to get done in that meeting. So a lot of one-on-ones to make sure that I'm on the same page as people before we go into the 60-person meeting, because I don't want to find out in front of 60 people that we misunderstood each other. And then usually a little bit of my day is spent researching what's the new neat thing out there. And then it's whatever fires need to be put out. And that's the thing that I can't really predict. And the fires aren't always fires. It ranges from an actual issue that's happening in production that we need to go troubleshoot. And sometimes it's an issue with software that I wrote 10 years ago that I still get called in to help with. Sometimes it's something as fun as, you know, if we have somebody's birthday coming up, hopping on a call, what are we going to do to celebrate Sue's birthday? Who's bringing cupcakes? So just ad hoc stuff that ranges from the sky is falling to figuring out how we're going to celebrate somebody's retirement.
Typical days that aren't ever really typical days. I'm watching your face because we're getting to do this live, and you just light up when you talk about your work. So it seems like you're excited about everything you work on.
I am. The group that I belong to is called Entertainment Experiences. And as you mentioned in my intro, I help to make X1. We make a product called Flex, a product called Stream. We're just constantly iterating and building the next new thing. And it stays interesting. Like my excitement for X1 in 2013 is the same as my excitement for Flex in 2017 is the same for my excitement of the next new thing in 2023. And if I'm not retired, will be my excitement in 2030.
May we all find that kind of excitement in our work. I think it's something we all should be inspired to try and find. I mentioned earlier you won 2 Emmys, which is an amazing achievement. And Huge congratulations for that. So I want to know more. What were they for? Because you don't generally hear about software engineers winning Emmys. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope I get the details right. But the first one is a Primetime Emmy. That was for the 2013 to 14 Primetime Emmys. And that was for the actual UI design of X1. The interface that we created, the interactivity that it facilitated was absolutely groundbreaking. And that's what got us a Primetime Emmy that year. And the second one is a technical Emmy, and that was from the 2017 to 2018 Emmy Awards. And that was a technical Emmy for the voice remote.
That is pretty amazing. And having been someone who's used both of those products, I can understand they were groundbreaking. And how does it make you feel knowing the millions of people that use that thing that you built, that it's sitting on their coffee table and they pick it up every day?
I think that you hit the nail on the head of exactly why I get so excited about this. It is so incredibly satisfying to know that not only do millions of people use the products that I contribute to and help lead, but that they use it for all of these wonderful reasons. They use it to sit down at the end of the day and relax with their family. They use it because they want to have a laugh, or maybe they want to have a cry and watch a rom-com. They use it because they want to find out more about what's going on in the world. You know, the pandemic, I felt more touched than ever about how our television screens were one of the big things that were keeping us connected to everything that was going on, and what a huge role that me and my team helped to play of keeping people informed, keeping people company, bringing people joy when we were all really, really scared. And going back to talking about when I wanted to go to college, it's never lost on me that the very first thing that I wanted to do when I went to college was film and video production, because I wanted to work in television. And all these years later, I think I touch more people with software than I ever would have as a producer or an actress. And I don't know that I ever would have won 2 Emmys by doing film and video production. My mom was right, and it all worked out.
And I'm sure she's very proud as well. Obviously, great accomplishments up to this point. You clearly have more that you want to do. So let's talk about what's next. What's next for you as a technologist, as a leader, and for you personally?
So what is next? That's the million-dollar question. Sitting here talking with you today, my passion, and it's been growing for a while, is to give back and share with others, everyone, but particularly women and women of color, how to put more of us in a room, how, whatever secret sauce I might have found out, how I can share that, not keep it a secret, not bottle it up, and also encourage others as they find their own secret sauce to share it and share until we don't have to mention that we're women in technology anymore. We're just people in technology. So that's been a big focus of mine lately, is writing and speaking. And I guess my 5-year plan would hopefully be to compile a lot of the ad hoc writing and article writing I've been doing into a book. Maybe not just me, but me and some of the other women that I speak with and write with, some of the women that have mentored me, some of the women that I mentor, and just compiling all of our secret sauce together. So that's my 5-year goal right now, is getting everything out there. And, I mentioned retirement. It's definitely something that I'm thinking about, hopefully in the next 7 years or so. I've been quite frugal over the years, so I've been eyeing up just sitting on a beach for a while. But I want to make sure, just like in software, the same way I would never write a bunch of software and then leave without teaching the next engineers how to maintain it, that's how I feel about also soft skills and how to get ahead. I want to make sure I not only leave instructions for how to use the software, but instructions for how to use the system.
I love the ideas that you have for what's coming next, and whatever I and WITS can do to support those, we are all in. All you have to do is knock and tell us what we can do to help. Well, Leslie, this has been such a great conversation. I'm so glad you were able to join us again. Thank you for sharing about your journey. I know everyone's going to not only be interested, but be able to take away some really great thoughts on what their journey is going to look like. If listeners want to get in touch with you, how should they do that?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me.
I really appreciate you taking the time, stepping away from the sessions here at WITS to talk with us for a while. Thanks again.
It was my pleasure.
And I want to encourage everyone to be sure and go back and listen to some of the prior episodes of the podcast, and go to womenintechsummit.com and look at the upcoming summits. Be sure and get your tickets to join us. Thank you all for joining us on Wits and Wisdom, and we'll see you next time.
Ready to learn more about the Women in Tech Summit? Visit our website at womenintechsummit.net. That's womenintechsummit.net to view our most up-to-date event schedules, calls for speakers, and sponsorship opportunities. If you enjoyed this episode, bookmark the show, give us a follow, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us educate, inspire, and connect with even more movers and shakers within and beyond the technology industry. Thanks for listening, and see you here again soon on Wits and Wisdom, a podcast from the Women in Tech Summit and the Inspiring Tech Foundation.